Thank you. Good evening. This is Adam Yaron with the City of Scottsdale. Today's date is Tuesday, November 17th. This is a meeting of the Neighborhood Advisory Commission. Brandon, next slide, please. The Neighborhood Advisory Commission advises and makes recommendations to the City Council on policies, plans, strategies, and programs for the preservation, improvement, and revitalization of Scottsdale's neighborhoods. As a matter of the first item on tonight's agenda, we'll be doing a call to order. Brandon, can we do a roll call, please? If you could switch to the other matrix, please.
Commissioner Budwig?
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner James?
Commissioner James, present.
Commissioner Maraldi?
Present, thank you.
Vice Chair Amanda Nash? Absent. Chair Putman?
Present, thank you.
Chair Wills, absent.
Chair Putman, the first item on tonight's agenda is approval meeting minutes for October 28th, 2020. Brandon, next slide, please. All of these minutes were included in the Commission's agenda packet that was found online. Staff recommends the Neighborhood Advisory Commission review and approve the draft meeting minutes for the regular meeting of the Neighborhood Advisory Commission meeting that occurred on October 28th.
Great, thank you. So this is Chair Putman. Can I have a motion to go ahead and approve the meeting minutes from our meeting on October 28th, 2020? October 28th, 2020?
I'll make a.
Sorry, Chair Putman, I was just going to say I recognize Commissioner Maraldi with her hand up.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of October 28th, 2020.
Great, thank you. And do we have a second to go ahead and approve the meeting minutes from October 28th, 2020?
Commissioner James, second.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Budwig?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner James?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Maraldi?
Yes.
And Chair Putman?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. That completes the item number one on our agenda. Chair Putman and members of the commission, if we could, I'd like to suggest we reorganize items 2 and 3 on tonight's agenda, just because item 3 is going to be a bit shorter than item 2. So with respect to the item 3 for our next agenda, Brandon, next slide, please. We have item 3, code enforcement's response to short-term rentals in Scottsdale. Next slide, please, Brandon. As part of this item, we'll be confirming receipt of public comments submitted on this agenda item. We have a presentation from Ron Kagi, Planning and Development Area Director, and this is an information and discussion item only. Next slide, please, Brandon. We did receive one public comment that was sent out to the commission, and just wanted to acknowledge that item that was sent yesterday. And we have for tonight's presentation, as I mentioned, Ron Kagi in attendance. Ron?
Thank you, Adam. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Good. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you, Commission, for the opportunity to provide you with an update on this. The memo that I sent out pretty much describes the history behind this, but I'll go through this again very briefly. There were 2 ordinances passed by the City Council last year in September that went into effect in October. One was specifically regarding short-term rentals, and one was regarding nuisance parties and unlawful gatherings. With the short-term rentals, the main focus was to provide an opportunity for the city to create a registry so that short-term rental property owners or operators are required required to provide contact information, the hopes of which is to be easier to contact them for any initial contact as it relates to problems occurring at their short-term rental in lieu of calling the police. Of course, we always encourage people to call PD if necessary, but this idea was to try to make contact with them to try to resolve the problem firsthand. So that registry was created. Then we also have several enforcement actions that we took place as part of the short-term rentals. And you can see some of the statistics here. Since that time, we've had 644 registered short-term rentals. I will tell you that probably about a third of them were done voluntarily. And in fact, about a third of them came in right after the ordinance was passed and said, we want to register, we want to be in compliance. That was a good sign because that made us feel that we had some good operators out there. The other ones then basically came when we were resulted from a complaint and we investigated whether or not they were registered with the city. So there's several things that they actually need to do. The rentals need to be registered with Maricopa County as a rental property. That's for taxing purposes. They need to be registered with the city of Scottsdale as a short-term rental. And so you can see we have some statistics there as it relates to enforcement activities. So we had 255 properties that failed to register with the city. And that's it was 292 total. You can see that some of these have multiple violations. So 255 did not register with the city. We issued notices of violation or compliance orders, and they complied. It's a very simple process to go through. You can do it online through an interactive registration process. And I think there was a link in your email, I'm sorry, in your memo that takes you to an interactive map where you can actually search for a specific property, or you could just zoom in on or drill down to a property. And if you see a red border around it, it means that, I'm sorry, a blue border around it, it means that it's registered with Maricopa County. If you see a little eye icon in there, it means it's registered with the city of Scottsdale. The other things that we enforced were the requirement for them to have their TPT license embedded somewhere on their advertising platform. Again, very simple to come into compliance. They simply needed to contact Airbnb or HomeAway or VRBO, whatever platform they're advertising on, and have that embedded in there. We also then have part of that ordinance was the violations that we've been enforcing is operating a short-term rental as a non-residential use, such as an event center. We had a number of homes, good-sized homes that certainly would accommodate a lot of folks and good-sized properties that were essentially renting them out just specifically for example, wedding receptions or to host, we had what are called mansion parties. And that, because they're not being operated as a short-term rental, they literally are being operated as a commercial business. We enforce that section of the ordinance. You can see there was 114 violations that we've had open since the beginning of the enforcement actions. We've actually taken one to court. We've only had to take one to court through the civil citation process, and we were successful in prosecution of that property, identifying them as an event center. If you have any questions on this section, please ask. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next section. Thank you.
We do have a hand raised by Chair Putman.
Yes, thank you. I had a question regarding these, statistics. These, definitely paint such a great picture. Just wondering how or if you share these more publicly. I know being on the Nextdoor app, for example, we constantly hear of complaints that Scottsdale isn't, doing anything with these short term. So I feel like this helps to really paint a picture of what you guys are doing. So just wondering if this goes out more broadly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. No, we have not utilized that platform to promote or advertise or just even show these statistics. We certainly have this information made available to the mayor and city council. And actually, ironically, I had a public records request today from the newspaper, from the Arizona Republic, looking for the exact same statistics. I had provided these to the reporter back in July of this year. And so she was looking for a follow-up story. So I know she's doing a follow-up story on this, and I'm sure it will include this information. information. So that certainly will be made available to the public. But no, we've not used that, but I'm happy to chat with Kelly Corset about that as to what might be the best way to have this information made available to a broader audience. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have another hand raised by Commissioner James.
Hello, Commissioner James speaking. I was looking at the interactive map on the link and noticed that actually there are several properties that seem to be identified as short-term rentals that are not simultaneously identified as licensed in or registered in Maricopa County. Is there an enforcement about that? How does that happen? What does that mean on the map?
So just to be clear, thank you for that inquiry. Just to be clear, you're looking at a parcel and it only has the little I icon and does not have a boundary around it?
Correct.
Oh,
There are
well,
a number of those on the map.
okay, then yes, that would be a violation of them not being registered with Maricopa County. And two things. One, you can certainly send us those addresses that you see in the short term, but in the longer term, I think what we need to do is kind of call that map and look for them and find them so that we don't have to have you kind of turning them in. But yes, if in the very short term, the best way to do is just send an email with those addresses and we can handle those. But again, looking down the road, I think we need to be more proactive and aggressively address those that are not registered with Maricopa County, but are registered with us. It's kind of unusual for that to that situation. So thank you for that.
I actually have no real incentive to look up an address and make a complaint. But when the information is readily available on this site, which is a city site, I'm wondering if there's anyone who's looking at that systematically. Thank you.
Thank you for that. No, we are not systematically looking at it. We respond to complaints. But as I mentioned, we certainly will look at these and sure, we can hunt down the ones that you physically have seen if, and find them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We don't have any more hands raised for this slide. Brandon, if you'd like to advance to the next slide, please.
Okay, so this is the second ordinance that went into effect at the same time as the other. This is regarding nuisance parties and unlawful gatherings. The only real difference between the two is that unlawful gatherings would either have drugs involved or minors involved. Otherwise, they would be pretty much fall into the nuisance party category. So that's why you see such a large number for nuisance parties and a smaller number for the unlawful gatherings. But the process is still the same. The city of Scottsdale PD receives a complaint regarding a nuisance, noise, unwanted behavior, whatever it's been described, and they'll go out and investigate. Prior to this ordinance being into effect, the only real tools they had was to one, either just ask people to turn it down, hope that they did and not have to come back, or the only enforcement action they really had was to issue a disorderly conduct citation or disturbing the peace. Those two terms are interchangeable. That's a criminal offense, and that certainly has a higher level of requirements to meet the test to issue those. And so this new ordinance provided an alternative as an incentive to convince property owners to be in compliance and be good neighbors. One of the things about this ordinance, the very specific, is it applies to all residential properties: short-term rental, long-term rental, owner-occupied, multifamily, single family. So it's not designed to specifically issue out one type of usage, but is what is applicable for all residential properties. So mechanically, this is what happens. The PD gets a call, they go out and investigate, and if they believe it rises to the level of a nuisance party, they issue a notice of violation on the spot to the host, if you will. I'll use whether it's short-term rental or just somebody having a party. Whoever the responsible party is that's hosting the party is going to receive that notice of violation. If in fact they're not the property owner, and in most cases they're not, then a copy of that gets sent to the property owner, putting the owner on notice that this unwanted behavior was occurring at property that they have control of. So that's the mechanics behind it. PD then sends that information to us, to code enforcement. We open up a new case and start tracking the property, because the fees then that are assigned to that, police service fees that go into effect, are cumulative. They will graduate from $500 to $1,250 to $2,500. So typically what happens is the host of the party gets a copy of the notice, and they're then going to get a bill from our accounting department for the police service fee of $500. If this is the first time that PD has gone to that specific address, then the property owner gets a notice, a warning, basically saying, okay, you weren't there to control what's happening at your property, but we're putting you on notice that the next time, within 180 days, if PD has to go out to respond to a nuisance complaint, and again rises to the level of a nuisance party, then not only does the host, the person hosting the party, get the $500 service fee, but the property owner then receives a $500 service fee. And if they have to go out again within 180 days for the same scenario, it goes to $1,250, then ultimately up to $2,500. So that's the idea behind that, is to try to hold the property owner responsible for what is occurring on their property. And again, we have a lot of very responsible property owners that have taken a lot of steps to try to control what occurs on their property. But as you can see from the numbers there, between the nuisance party and the unlawful gatherings, PD has had to respond, and the nuisance party notice of violations billings have gone out to these various individuals, again, both hosts of the parties as well as the property owners themselves. So if you have any questions about that, happy to answer those. Thank you.
I see a hand raised by Commissioner James.
Hi, Commissioner James speaking. Thank you for the presentation. There's a list of what constitutes an unlawful gathering in the material that's attached here. And I'm wondering, given changes that have gone on since the list was generated, namely the business of COVID and limitations imposed by Maricopa County on the size of gatherings. If there's any definition of unlawful gathering that has to do with the number of people involved. So Maricopa County says that for a public event, you can't have more than 50 people, with some exceptions, but doesn't really put a number on private gatherings, which presumably would be what would occur in one of these locations. At the same time, the county says that restaurants and businesses, for instance, should be operating at a lower than full capacity, of a 50% capacity, for instance. Is there any capacity measure that's involved in considering whether or not an event at a private facility like someone's rental house is an unlawful gathering?
Thank you for that inquiry. That question has been asked several times. The short answer is no. There is no specific number that lists a maximum number of people that can attend an event at a private party. And when that inquiry has come in the past, I've asked PD, have you thought about wanting, because this is their ordinance, essentially, they enforce this, and whether or not this is something that they would welcome. And of course the answer is, this very specific answer is, if the city council is inclined to make changes to this ordinance, then certainly if there is a maximum that's put in there that defines the number of people for the gatherings, that's either in line with the county or at least supports something that the county might do, then certainly if the council modifies the ordinance, then the city of Scottsdale Police Department would enforce such measures. But again, the short answer is no, there is not anything in there at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Was there any additional questions for Mr. Kagi at this time? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, Brandon, if you would advance to the next slide. This was just an information and discussion item only. So thank you, Ron, for the update. We appreciate it. Moving on to item 2 of tonight's agenda, which again was taken out of order. We have approaches to community engagement. Next slide, please, Brandon. We'll be confirming receipt of public comments submitted on this agenda item. We have a presentation by Kelly Corsett, Communications and Public Affairs Director. And this is an information and discussion item only as well. In terms of public comments received, next slide, please, Brandon. We do not have any public comments received. And at this point in time, I'll turn this over to Kelly Corsett, who's in attendance to make a presentation.
Hello, thank you, Adam. This is Kelly Corsett, been Scottsdale's Communications and Public Affairs Director for about the past 10 years, actually. So, Chair Putman, members of the commission, thank you for having me tonight. I've got a handful of slides to walk through, and I just want to reiterate some things that are in the memo that I provided for your agenda packet, and that is that this discussion comes at a very appropriate time because we as a city, and in my department specifically, are looking at our public engagement manual, our public engagement standards. We're exploring what changes might be warranted. We're looking at different technologies and how they might be brought to bear to improve the way that we can connect with the public as a city. And as I mentioned in that cover memo, the fact that we are meeting in this online space is another indicator. As we all know, the COVID-19 global pandemic has really forced a lot of people to work differently. And given the success that we've had in many of these online meeting spaces, we are really taking a very different look at our existing public participation standards, given what we're learning. Not to say that we would ever do away with face-to-face meetings and open houses and a lot of those tried and true methods, but the fact that people have become so much more comfortable in these digital spaces, I think is really going to tell us that the digital needs to be a primary component of our public engagement strategy. So with that as a preamble, I'm going to go through a few slides, talk about how we think about public engagement, and then I'm looking forward to having a conversation with all of you. And I have some scenarios for us to talk through, because I would love to hear from your perspectives how you think engagement should be handled for some different scenarios. And we've had these conversations with several groups, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that with you all tonight. So next slide, please, Brandon. Here we go. Thank you. The city really has our marching orders, as I think of them, with regard to community engagement, really comes straight from here. And we have a collaboration and engagement chapter in the Scottsdale General Plan. And I know that the General Plan is going through an update process, but I also know that collaboration and engagement chapter is going to be there. That chapter actually contains a single element, and that's the community involvement element. And so I think what everybody can see here is how centrally the concept of a government that is open and responsive to its residents is here in Scottsdale. In the community involvement element in the general plan, you will find these specific goals. One is that we will seek early and ongoing community involvement through broad public input in project and policy making decisions. 2, we will proactively seek community-wide representation in civic matters through vigorous outreach programs. 3, we will distribute city information in ways relevant to personal and professional interests. And 4th, that we will foster community partnerships to share information and work toward collaborative solutions. So those goals within the community involvement element of the general plan are really quite clear about what the community expects their city government to be doing in terms of public engagement. So we have a pretty clear base from which to support and launch our community engagement in public participation efforts as a city government. And sometimes I think we do a really good job. And other times, honestly, we don't do as good a job as we probably should be. So I'm going to walk through some examples just to set the stage here. And I would say that pre-COVID, you would probably find most Scottsdale public participation opportunities designed a little something like this. Next slide, please. We will identify an area to speak with. We will mail out some postcards, and we'll put out some A-frame signs to host an open house. That has really kind of been our go-to engagement strategy in the past. Next slide. We will buy some bland grocery store cookies. If you're lucky, we might go to Costco and get some of the good big chocolate chip cookies. But this has been a staple of our engagement strategy. Next slide, please. We will bring lots of display boards. We will put up some foam core boards with maps and maybe some acronyms, and we'll have them arranged on easels so that people can come and see the kinds of things that we want to talk about. And we may even have staff, in this case, our colleague Taylor Reynolds, pose for a photo, preferably a blurry photo pointing to something on a poster board. And you may even see some staff, next slide, please, who look a little something like this during the public engagement exercise. Next slide, please. I go through that to poke a little bit of fun at what has, cookies notwithstanding, become what in some cases is a little bit of a stale approach to public engagement. And frankly, Scottsdale is not the only community that has been doing things this way for a long time. And again, that doesn't mean those techniques are not useful. We can point to many examples where community open houses have been very effective ways to connect with the public, and they will never leave our toolkit. But like I said, we are looking at things with fresh eyes. So what do we really believe about public participation? There are guidelines for public participation that we really believe in, and that is this. Next slide, please. We believe the public should have a say in decisions and actions that affect their lives. That would be a difficult statement to disagree with. We believe that, and we try to embody that in the ways that we approach decision making. If a decision that we as a city are making or asking the city council to make affects people's lives, and let's face it, most of the decisions that we make here in city government do affect people's lives, we believe the people directly affected should have a say in the decision. Next slide, please. We also believe that we should seek out and facilitate the involvement of those potentially affected. This photo is from, I believe, the general plan visioning workshop from a few years ago. So like I said, meeting in person is and remains a very effective way to do things, even though we are largely precluded from doing that right now. I think we hope that we will return there someday. But regardless, we as your city government should seek out and facilitate your involvement if you're potentially affected by something. Next slide. We also believe that we need to provide participants with information that they need. It's really difficult for anybody to engage with their city government if they don't understand the topic. And I've been government communications for about 25 years now, and it's always been part of my job to help translate what is potentially complex information for members of the public engaging with their government for what may be the first time into words that they can easily understand and therefore tell us what they think about them. So we believe that providing good information is a tenet of this process. And finally, next slide, please. We believe we need to communicate with the public on how their input affected the decision. There's few things worse than putting an effort into something, and we really do recognize that when residents come out or participate in an online process to give us their feedback, it's very frustrating when that's the last they hear about it. So we believe strongly that we need to communicate how that feedback is used. It's really about closing the loop. Next slide, please. So to guide our staff and as we redevelop our public participation manual, we have distilled all of these concepts into what I consider 3 levels of engagement. We will generally choose one of these as our guiding strategy when we're doing public outreach. And the first level is communicate. In that, we will tell you what's happening and we will listen to your input and acknowledge your concerns. This is a baseline level of public engagement. Let you know what's going on. Listen to what you have to say. Next slide, please. The next level builds upon that. So with communicate as that baseline, the next level is consult. And in addition to giving you information and listening to your input, we will keep you informed and we will share how your input influenced the decision. Next slide, please. And the next level of engagement is collaborate. We start with communicate, we can build to consult, and at the highest level, we consider it collaboration. And that's where we're actively asking for people's ideas and using those to influence the decision or shape the policy or the project to the extent that it's possible for that to do so. Next slide, please. So I'm sorry, can you back one up? Thank you. With those levels of engagement, communicate as a baseline, build to consult in some cases, build even further to collaborate in some cases. What I'd like to do is present all of you and open up for conversation some scenarios. And I'm really interested to know from those of you who have thoughts, what level of engagement you think these different scenarios would require. In these cases, how would you expect the city of Scottsdale to approach you as a member of the public or your neighborhood? So go ahead and bring that first example up if you would, please, Brandon. So here's example number 1. The scenario is this. The city plans to replace playground equipment at your neighborhood park. So with that as the issue, I'm curious to know if any of you on the commission have thoughts or opinions about what level of engagement. And this is one of those, there are no right or wrong answers. I'm genuinely interested in learning what you all think. What level of engagement do you think would you expect for an issue like this, replacing playground equipment at your neighborhood park?
Chair Putman, I see a hand up.
Yes, this is Chair Putman. I would want them to collaborate. And that's the kind of answer you're looking for, right? Using one of those choices.
Chair Putman, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Why would you see collaboration as that for that particular topic?
I think because when it comes to a playground, you really have a lot of options out there. It's not, this doesn't say, something that has to bring to code or different laws have changed or something like that, where we're really kind of black and white on what needs to be done from the city. When you think about a playground, you really want to get the opinions of those that are going to be using it in the community. Families that are going out to the playground now, you want to make sure that they're on board for what's going to be happening for the future. So I really think you have a nice opportunity to collaborate on this one and really get in the buy-in from those who are going to be able to utilize that new playground. The last thing you want to do is make all these changes and then usage of that playground goes down because it's not as nice as the one that they could be going to instead. So I think it's just important to really get those opinions.
Thank you, Chair. I see a hand raised by Commissioner James, followed by Maraldi.
This is Commissioner James. I agree, collaborate is the right level. I think another factor, though, is collaborate with whom. To put out this issue to a community in kind of an undifferentiated way would be putting out a request for involvement to many people who really have no particular reason to be involved. And if a lot of requests for involvement go out indiscriminately to groups, I think there's a certain collaboration fatigue that could set in. This seems like an issue that ought to be aimed at, the collaboration ought to be aimed at families that are likely to be using this, and could, for instance, be coordinated through schools or preschools. Thank you.
Commissioner Moraldi.
Yes, this is Commissioner Moraldi. I would agree. Also, I think communicate would be very important in this, and you would want to communicate with a small selection of people probably who lived in the neighborhood. But to get that information out to them, maybe by an online survey and gather some or letting them know what was happening, and then collaborate to see what ideas certainly they had for their park. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by Commissioner Budwig.
Yes, thank you. I just, I thought I wanted to add that I've actually got this happening right in my backyard, where our neighborhood park is, there's a sign up that it's going to be renovated sometime in November. And I think, to talk to what everyone spoke about, which is to collaborate, it would have been very cool for the homes around that specific area to have some kind of online survey, to kind of be able to voice, do you want a shade? Do you want bridges for the kids? Are the swings important? So to touch on what everyone spoke to, I think that focused local insight would be very cool to have. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Budwig. Were there any additional comments for this slide with Kelly? Please raise your hand. Seeing none. Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you, Adam. And Brandon, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. I am curious, though, Commissioner Budwig, what's the name of that neighborhood park? Do you know?
Yeah, we back up to Comanche Park, right there in McCormick Ranch. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I will. I'm going to do a little more research about how we're handling that. Thank you all. This is exactly the kind of conversation I was hoping to have. So the next example is this. Maybe not as universally potentially lovable as a neighborhood park. The city plans to install a roundabout at a major intersection near your neighborhood. What level of engagement would you expect to see?
Commissioner Moraldi, followed by Chair Putman.
This is Commissioner Moraldi. Communication jumps out at me at this one because I know roundabouts seem to cause a lot of concern. So I think that would be the most important part. As far as collaboration goes, I think there would be so many different thoughts on it that that one would be difficult to get a consensus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Putman.
Chair Putman, thank you. I kind of resonated to communicate as well. The reason I say that is because when you think about a roundabout at a major intersection, usually it's prompted by accidents, different things like that. So to me, it seems like the community almost already gave their thoughts on this intersection. If things are happening where a change needs to be made, maybe there's been complaints or there's just the number of accidents. So I feel like the consult part's already been done. And at this point, once that decision's been made, I think it's you're following a lot of list of specific ways to do it. So I feel like communicate would really be the best one here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any additional comments to this slide? Seeing none, Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And next slide, please, Brandon. Members of the commission, here is this scenario. A new dog park is ready to be built. The location was determined 15 years ago. Any thoughts on the level of engagement you would expect to see here?
Commissioner James.
Hi, Commissioner James. Yeah, I feel like this is a collaborate. As a dog park user, um, it's something that one has some experience with and has opinions about. Consulting at least because um, people who have dogs and take them to dog parks have experience of what goes on there, and it would be good to have that input. But this is something that obviously is not a kind of highly time-sensitive thing. It's been sitting there for 15 years. So getting people involved and figuring out how it should be structured, what would be good to have in it, is important. How much shade should there be in it, for instance? I think collaborate is the way to go with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner James. I see hand raised by Commissioner Moraldi.
This is Commissioner Moraldi. I would see more of a consult here since the park's ready to be built, everything's been determined. And then perhaps some collaboration on different elements of the park, but I think consult at this point would work there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Moraldi. Were there any additional comments to the slide presented on the screen before you? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, Kelly, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I'm scribbling notes down as all of you provide your thoughts, and I do appreciate it. Next slide, please, Brandon. This issue, an aggressive new recycling program is proposed that will result in fee increases for residents. So think about that for a moment and let me know if you have thoughts on the level of collaboration you would expect to see, or I'm sorry, the level of engagement you'd expect to see.
Chair Putman.
Chair Putman. So, well, personally, I wish that you would just communicate on something like this. I understand that we're a city and, things may not always be, kind of determined by the community. So for me, I would say consult and just maybe have any ideas of ways to kind of ease the burden that this financial burden that this might have on the recipients. Maybe there's some grant programs or just different things that we could help the community out with once this change goes into effect. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Putman. Were there any additional comments from commissioners in regards to the slide presented on the screen before you? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, Kelly.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please, Brandon. This issue. And I will say to all of you that I made all these up. These are from an exercise that we've done with a few different groups, and we have a bunch of different scenarios. So there's nothing eminent on any of these topics. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that as I describe this particular hypothetical issue, and that is that the city is planning to install more photo enforcement cameras.
Commissioner James.
I would say communicate and consult. This doesn't sound like something that's going to really have a lot of collaboration around it. People seem to have strong opinions about this, and if the city is deciding to do it, then suggesting that people have input that really isn't going to change what the city does, I think would be a negative experience for people. So I would say communicate, possibly consult, but not collaborate.
Thank you, Commissioner James. I see a hand raised by Commissioner Moraldi.
This is Commissioner Moraldi. Yes, I would say the same thing that Commissioner James just said. It would be communicate and consult, especially since the issue is the city is planning to install the cameras. I think, yeah, collaboration wouldn't be necessary at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Moraldi. Were there any additional comments by commissioners in response to the slide that's presented on the screen before you? Please raise your hand now. Seeing none, Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you, Adam. And Brandon, next slide, please. Okay, I believe this is our last hypothetical scenario. The issue is that the water department is changing the way it treats the city water supply. Give that a moment to sink in, no pun intended, and let me know if any of you have thoughts on what you would consider the appropriate level of engagement on this topic.
Commissioner James.
Communicate. This seems like a topic that has a certain degree of expertise that's involved in it, and therefore consulting and collaborating might not be as appropriate as communicating.
Thank you, Commissioner James. Were there any other commissioners that would like to respond to the slide presented on the screen? Seeing no hands raised, Kelly?
Thank you, Adam. Next slide, please, Brandon. Which is my last slide. So thank you all very much for thinking through those scenarios and for giving me your thoughts on what level of engagement you think would be appropriate. It's very useful. I took notes, and as we rebuild the public participation manual, I'll be considering some of the things that you said, along with a lot of other input. I think what the exercise also illustrates is the vast number of different things that a city government does on behalf of its residents. And it's difficult for us to have a one size fits all approach, because of course different engagement techniques and approaches work for different residents, and they also work for different topics. And as I mentioned from the beginning, I think there are some departments in our city that are probably best in class at engagement, and others that are not. Most have their hearts in the right place, but where we're trying to get as a city is to a place where we engage you, the public, in a consistent and productive fashion, in ways that that make sense to you, are easy to be involved with, and produce good results, so that you get better and more responsive government. So I'm wondering, and I'll just ask one last question, if any of you have any previous experiences with an engagement process or a project in the city, Commissioner Budwig's neighborhood park notwithstanding, where you've got some experience that you can speak from. Do you have anything you'd like to say on this topic of the way that Scottsdale engages residents on these types of things?
Commissioner James.
Commissioner James speaking. I actually don't have experience of that sort. However, I have a sort of a somewhat different thought, which is that the examples that you presented, which are very interesting, and I think the discussion was very interesting, are pretty concrete and specific. It seems to me that there are some broader issues that get dealt with at the city council level, and perhaps at levels beyond that in the population, where Scottsdale is going, the city, the general plan issues, for instance, that may not have as direct input from a large number of Scottsdale residents as for instance, some of these more specific issues do. We have had a recent election, which I guess is a kind of engagement of people in terms of some of the issues that were dealt with in the mayoral election around development and how space is used in Scottsdale. And the city council is presumably dealing with some broader Scottsdale issues on a regular basis. It would be helpful, I think, to have a statement, if you will, of major issues before Scottsdale. Things that are being dealt with by the city council, things that have been dealt with in the election, and a way for citizens to have input to those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner James. I will say that we are working with a polling, an online polling system that over time will allow you as residents to become members of a site essentially, and agree that from time to time the city may approach you for your thoughts and opinions on all manner of topics. I agree with you. The neighborhood playground should be a much easier engagement on behalf of the city, because we know who it directly affects, and it's quite easy for most people to consider the information and think about what they would like to see there. It becomes much more difficult, and therefore I think much harder to engage the public, and much harder for the public to engage on issues like vision and planning and those sorts of things. So I very much appreciate the comment, and I do think we have some things in the works that may help open up a larger community group of community members who can help the city by providing opinions on topics. So more to come on that, and I thank you for the response. With that, Chair Putman, Adam, I don't see any hands, and I don't have any other slides in my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Chair Putman, Brandon, next slide, please. This was an information and discussion item only at this time. If there was any additional questions or comments that you would like a response to from Kelly on this, he's available at this time. We'll just take a moment. If you'd like to raise any hands, please feel free to do so. I see a hand raised by Commissioner Budwig.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Budwig. I just want to say, Kelly, the idea of the opportunity for the residents and citizens of Scottsdale to be able to give this kind of input in a survey or a poll, what came across to me is that would be very exciting. I think to get implemented and for people to feel like they really do have a voice when it comes to those items that they can have more of a voice on. Obviously, the photo radar, the roundabouts, there's reasons those things are coming about. But things that the dog park, the parks, changing of lights and benches, I think they would love to give input on all that. So, thanks for that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Budwig. Were there any additional comments by the commission at this time? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, that'll wrap up the discussion for this item. And Kelly, thank you very much for the presentation this evening.
Thank you all very much.
Brandon, next slide, please. With respect to the next item on tonight's agenda, this is going to be a new item that we'll have standing on our agenda. This is identification of future agenda items. Brandon, next slide, please. This is an opportunity in which the Neighborhood Advisory Commission may suggest items that they wish to be placed on a future agenda. Per Arizona state law, the commission will not discuss or deliberate or take action on these items suggested, other than to say that there would be a desire from the commission to have them on a future agenda. And so if there are any topics at this point in time that come to mind, feel free, commissioners, to raise your hand and bring those items up now. If you'd like to raise your hand. Commissioner Maraldi.
This is Commissioner Maraldi. I know we have grant money. I'm not sure where we stand on the money that we did have or the money for the future. So I'd like to put that as an agenda item that we discuss and plan what we might want to do with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Maraldi. Were there any additional items by the commission that would like to be heard now? Seeing none, as part of this agenda item, what we'll do is we had a suggestion by Commissioner Maraldi that she would like to see the Neighborhood Enhancement Grant Fund discussion be brought back at a future agenda. We do need to have a roll call vote on that request. And so Brandon, if you would, please switch to the other slide. With that proposal, we had a motion by Commissioner Maraldi. Chair Putman, if you'd like to call for a second.
Chair Putman, do we have a second for this motion?
Commissioner James, second.
Thank you very much, Commissioner James. At this time, we'll do a roll call vote on this item. Commissioner Budwig?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner James?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Maraldi?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Chair Putman?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. That completes item 4. And again, this was just information, discussion, and possible action, which we just took. So thank you for that. Brandon, if we could move on to item 5. This is staff updates as our last item on tonight's agenda. With respect to the Spirit of Scottsdale submissions, just bringing to the attention of the commission that, again, we only have 9 submissions for the 2020 remaining portion of the submission timeframe that will expire at the end of this calendar year. These numbers represent nominations received between September 24th and November 17th. So if you have any folks that want to submit, we still have time to do so. And Brandon on long range planning staff will be working with Office of Communications to ensure we maintain clear communication through the end of the year so as to try and garner more submissions. Next slide, please, Brandon. Our regularly planned December meeting for December 23rd will still remain. We don't have any alternative dates at this time. If I could ask for those commissioners in attendance, if you have a conflict in making that December 23rd meeting, could you please raise your hand so that we can note it? Otherwise, we'll plan on having a quorum as we do tonight. So I'll ask one more time, if we have conflict in making the December 23rd regularly scheduled meeting of the NAC, please raise your hand now. Seeing no hands raised for the record, that meeting date will remain. Brandon, next slide, please. With respect to the last item on tonight's staff updates, we do have one board vacancy, or commission vacancy rather. We'll be receiving an appointment from City Council on that vacancy on Tuesday, December 1st. The next meeting of the Neighborhood Advisory Commission will be Wednesday, December 23rd. That concludes staff updates. Chair Putman, if you have anything else for staff, we're available. Otherwise, if you'd like to call for adjournment. Chair Putman, you may be muted still.
Thank you, Chair Putman. Do I have a motion to adjourn this evening?
See hand raised by Commissioner Maraldi.
Commissioner Maraldi, I will make a motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Chair Putman, do I have a second motion to adjourn the meeting?
Commissioner James.
I second the motion to adjourn the meeting.
All in favor, if you'd please say aye.
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 Thank you very much for
Aye.
your time this evening. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you all back on December 23rd.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.